Welcome, everybody, to Hope for Our Times. And as I promised, last week we were all left hanging before the Thanksgiving break. John Haller was on last week, along with some absolutely wonderful guests all week. Dr. Hormuz Shariat, John Haller, and, of course, Jan Markell was with us last week. But John left us hanging right at the very end. And I got a lot of different comments and emails from people. Hey, you can't leave us like that. So John is back. But while we were having our Thanksgiving break, things have blown up literally in Syria. Things turned a way that I didn't see coming. I got all kinds of people ask me what in the world is going on in Syria. And I said, that's a good question. I couldn't think of a more perfect guest than the one I promised you is going to be back. So John Haller's here. John, thanks for joining me. And wow, things are rocking and rolling. And I'm hoping you can make sense of things because I am having a challenge after this past weekend.
Well, sorry to disappoint you. I think you'll have to have me on again to discuss something. I was thinking about this yesterday because I knew we were going to do this today. And I'm thinking like, okay, so everything changed in the Middle East very quickly. So there's a whole bunch of things. And so I think they're related to the ceasefire in Lebanon. And I also think they're related to the election of Trump. Yesterday's update, I titled it The Ripple Effect, because you know how you throw a stone in a still pond, you see the ripples go. But now it's like everybody's throwing stones. And so now it's a little bit turbulent in the ripple effect. The election of Trump, whether you like him or not, has had a big ripple effect on a lot of different areas. It's causing some people to leave the United States, which I'm on board with. I think I feel sorry for the places that they're going to. But just him coming into office. I was reading an article. It's either Washington. I always read the New York Times and Washington Post, sometimes for humor, but sometimes they have decent information in there. And one of them was complaining about the fact that, Trump's not the president yet. Why is he doing foreign policy? Like, they didn't do that back when Trump had been elected president. You remember what Obama did back in 2016? They did that resolution 2334, which is still having a ripple effect on everything in foreign policy. So I don't know why they get to do it, but the other side doesn't get to do it. So whether you like Trump or not, he is a force, and there's a lot of things being done in anticipation of him coming in and hitting the ground running, or trying to hit it running, when he takes the oath of office on January 20th, assuming that he's still around by then.
Assuming he makes it that far. January 20th, I'm looking, going, okay, I'm thinking one of the first things he's going to deal with is Israel, but I want to come to Israel in a few minutes because we left off talking about the normalization agreement, Saudi Arabia, where all of this is going to go. And I'll be honest with you, John, I did not foresee what has taken place over the weekend. Even my wife asked me the other day, can you explain all this to me? You know what I told her? I said, I can't. I said,
well, it was something that I don't think, listen, we pay attention to Bible prophecy. We sort of know the general parameters of what things are going to happen. And then there's like these curveballs or knuckleballs that keep getting thrown at us from these different directions. And so Syria really was something that I don't think we anticipated having. But so let's talk about why did it happen?
Yeah. Okay.
And the answer is there are three main factions in Syria. There are the people aligned with the Assad regime. There are I'm going to get the acronyms wrong. I think it's the Syrian Democratic Forces that are aligned against the Assad regime. And then there's also the ones that are aligned with the Kurds, and Turkey's kind of in the mix too. I think that's incredibly significant from a prophetic standpoint. But I think the ceasefire in Lebanon, let me back up. So what Iran has done is it's used Syria as a conduit for a number of years. Syria, and to keep the Assad regime in power, they brought in Hezbollah militias that have helped control large parts, mainly of southern Lebanon and mainly along the Golan Heights. And in the Syrian civil war, those Hezbollah fighters gained a lot of fighting expertise, which Hezbollah always said, we're going to use that when Israel invades us or we have a war with Israel, which they're having right now. But that really hasn't come about. So what's happened with the ceasefire in Lebanon, I think the ceasefire came about for a couple reasons on Israel's part. It was political and practical. There are things going on in Israel right now. Netanyahu is supposed to be starting testifying in a trial in a week. Again, the attorney generals there at odds. They've got all of this legislation, and a lot of people in Israel, I think, are not happy with the government. And part of it, so there's political things going on, and I think Israel just needed to say, okay, we need to calm down a little bit, take a pause. And I think there's a reason for the pause. One is the soldiers are tired. They've been serving over 200 days, the reserves. They've given up their jobs. They've given up families. My understanding is it's causing tremendous problems in the economy. These guys aren't able to work. They're losing their jobs. They're losing their wives. Or there's, a lot of family pressures, that type of thing. They're coming back injured. So between Gaza and the north, Gaza and Lebanon, there are about 850 dead IDF. Only about 80 of those in the north is my understanding. I think I have those numbers correct. But there's been about 6,000 injured, and about a quarter of those are severely injured. And so there's this rotation. Guys go up there, and it's tiring. Everybody should learn the lessons from America, where we went to an all-volunteer force and we exhausted our military forces by all these constant wars that we've been involved in. You just can't be deployed 6, 7, 8 months at a time for years on end. It just doesn't work. But look, we see the same thing happening with Russia and Ukraine, and Ukraine. They're having problems with soldiers. Okay, and Russia's going out and getting soldiers from North Korea. Mercenaries.
I'm going to throw a bunch of things out to you. So,
okay,
we have this issue that you just mentioned, which is pretty clear. We have this so-called ceasefire that, guess what? It's already been broken. There's rockets. 2 rockets were fired from Lebanon at Hardov in the northern Golan Heights. So the ceasefire's been broken. We have, as you mentioned, we have Iraqi armed forces. We have Iran is heavily involved. You have Russia coming in. You have these rebels. It looks like a coup, but we aren't really sure exactly what's going on. It was probably about a good 10 years ago. I remember David Hawkins saying to me at the time, remember all the Arab Spring issues that were going on?
Sure.
Was that 10, 12, 13 years ago?
It actually started. I actually was in Israel in March 2011.
Okay, so
we were staying at that resort at the end of the Sea of Galilee, the south end.
Okay.
And I got up in the morning and I checked the newspaper, and it said that there were riots going on in Daraa, which is a city in southern Syria, 30 miles away from where I was. So there I am at this resort, the Sea of Galilee that day was like glass, and literally all hell's breaking loose in Syria, 30-mile drive away.
Okay, so the Arab Spring, this is 14 years ago. And I remember Hawking saying, because all these other, Egypt got flipped, we saw these other things happen. He said, Assad is not going to go away the way that everybody is saying. He's still going to be there. So here we are, 14 years later. Assad is still in power, theoretically, as of now, this minute, right? But here's the Syrian rebels are launching kamikaze drones on the Assad regime. So we have this, and then there's this. 5 airports are under the control of the Syrian opposition. Aleppo, Meng military port, Neira, Abu al-Dawari, and Kiwers. military airport. So I mean, we're watching this dynamic shift while if we were to go back a week, I'm looking at Israel going, Trump's coming into power, and we have the normalization agreements coming. We're gonna watch things transition, but I'm looking at Syria going, what? And as you mentioned, okay. Also, I want to throw this out there. So you have fatigue of soldiers, all these things. You have the fatigue of soldiers. And is there enough manpower for Israel to occupy Gaza, to occupy southern Lebanon, to take back these territories? And actually, there's a lot going on. You're starting to look, going, well, wait a minute. How are we going to get to Ezekiel 38? How are we going to get to these things?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day too, and I'll throw out one more thing. So I was thinking about, the horse of war. It says the horseman comes and takes peace from the earth. And a lot of times that's interpreted to mean, oh, so the earth is at peace, and here comes this horseman and takes the peace away. And I don't know if that's the correct interpretation. And I'm not trying to change how we interpret the Bible, but I'm looking at it.
You're talking about the red horse, the book of Revelation, correct? Okay.
The horse of war. Right. And so I'm thinking, like, maybe it doesn't take peace away from a world at peace, but it takes away the prospect of peace. Of there ever being peace or trying to do peace. We've got wars all over the place. So, yeah, I would have agreed with David Hocking back in 13, 14 years ago when this Arab Spring started because Barack Obama stuck his finger into the middle of everything and stirred it up. And by the way, there's a great article in Tablet Magazine by Tony Badran, who's Lebanese and a security expert. And I can't remember the title of it. He's been writing about this, and he just comes out and says, this is all Obama. This is all Obama's doing. This is Obama's parting gift to the world to kind of cause chaos in the Middle East. So back to what David Hocking said. I agree with him. I didn't think Assad was going to go away. But what happened was we pretend that there's a country called Syria. There's not a country called Syria. It's a bunch of little enclaves controlled by warlords. In one of those warlords is a guy named Assad, who's given the title of president of Assyria. So Iran saw this chaos in Syria as an opportunity to create its Shia crescent, to go from Iran through Iraq, through Syria, all the way to the Mediterranean as sort of almost what you would call sort of like the Iranian Shia road to transfer weapons and everything. Now, Israel's tried to stop that. And a friend of mine, Jonathan Spire, great military correspondent from Israel, who spent a lot of time in Syria. If you've ever had the opportunity to have dinner with him, and you ask him questions about Syria, and then an hour later, you can do a follow-up because he knows so much about Syria. He's spent much time on the ground there. And he knows these different factions. But so Assad's not been in control of a lot of Syria. What the Assad regime did with the help of the Iranians and then the Russians who came in was they decided to empty Syria out of its Shia populations. I'm sorry, Sunni populations. Assad comes from the Alawite, and although it's not directly part of the Shia Islam that is predominant in Iran and that Iran's Ayatollah follows, it's related close enough that they can make an alliance to do this. So Assad saw, I'm going to have help. But we got to get rid of these Sunnis. And they get benefit from that, even though they don't like the Sunnis. They started bombing these Sunni villages, towns, and cities, and they just destroyed them. They bombed them to smithereens. I've seen the videos. And the Sunni population largely left. It went up to Sunni Turkey. It went over 1 million, went into Lebanon. and I don't know, 2 or 3 million went into Jordan. And so they caused all this, and then way over 1 million went to Europe. And now we're seeing all this problems in Europe because of that Sunni. Remember when we were talking about this, the huge numbers of Sunnis, mostly male, military-age males, going into Europe, well over 1 million. It was incredible. Some countries resisted, like Hungary. Poland resisted some, but others, like Germany, Netherlands, even UK, France, had problems. So this is kind of like the chaos that they wanted to cause everywhere else. There was a general who was in charge, I think his name was Breedlove, who was the head of NATO, the top general in the NATO alliance at the time. And he testified in front of Congress, and he said it was clear that what they did was they just bombed the smithereens out of these Sunni areas. And their goal was to get them on the road to become somebody else's problem. I think that played out. So the Syrian population at the start of the Arab Spring was about 23 million people. Now it's like 11 or 12 million. Well, where did all those people go? Well, about 700,000 to 1 million were killed. By the way, have you seen any protest at Harvard or Yale or Columbia or UCLA about the 700,000 to 1 million dead Syrians?
Won't hear a word about it. Not a word.
No, it's like forget about it. But you kill 20,000 Hamas fighters and the world melts down. Oh, look at those terrible Jews, what they're doing.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm going to throw this in there. And over 1 million people, Ukraine, have been killed.
That's
by
right.
that war. You don't hear nobody protests that because our government's so heavily involved. But you look at that and you go, 1 million Ukrainians, over 1 million.
Right. And there's been hundreds of thousands of Russians as well.
Okay, so sorry to sidetrack you. Back to Syria. But I mean, you don't hear anything about that. But
so back to what Israel tried to do, and what Jonathan Spyer's point was in a podcast I saw him on JNS the other night on the Quad. He said Israel had what they called the war between the wars, or the campaign between the wars, where Israel would come in to Syria or Lebanon, and they would see like, okay, they're building a weapons factory, or they're transferring weapons manufacturing components. So they boarded some ships that were doing this. Iran smuggling all this stuff in. But I think Jonathan Spyer made a great point, was that the campaign between the wars was a massive failure. Now, we who support Israel and love Israel and that type of thing, that's very difficult to say. Tom, I laid awake almost all night thinking about this, because there were plans that Israel knew about what Hamas or Hezbollah wanted to do a year before October 7th. 10 months before October 7th, I was in Israel, almost 10 months to the day. I was there for a Christian Media Summit, and the Israeli government took us down to the Gaza border. We went to the big base there where they had the mock-up of Gaza City. I don't know if you've been there or not, and we got to walk. Well, I didn't go through the tunnels because I figured I was going to get pretty clear that they weren't built for someone my size. I just thought it would be embarrassing that,
get stuck.
Media Summit person needs extracted from tunnel. I just didn't think.
You're like Winnie the Pooh. They take away all your food for a while till you can be pulled out.
Yeah, so it's sort of like, I just didn't think the optics of that would be very good. So I said, well, why don't you all go through it and tell me about it?
Make great video.
Yeah, well, and in today's day and age, you always got to be careful about that stuff showing up on YouTube. So anyway, and then we went over to some of the kibbutzim along the Gaza border. We went to Niram, which I think is maybe the closest kibbutz to the Gaza border fence. And you can stand there. They've got a fence around the kibbutz. You can see the field there. You can see where a tractor fell through a tunnel that Gaza had dug, and then you can see the border fence, and you can see Gaza in the distance. So, we're a kilometer from the Gaza border fence. And I'm thinking, Tom, I was a little bit peeved because the Israeli government takes us down there, and people in the government in the IDF have all these plans about what Hamas is going to do. And I mean, and I'm like you've been down there. You were down there when they were firing rockets. What if you were there on the day that they came across the border fence like they did on October 7th?
That's a good point, because my wife would not have actually enjoyed that at all.
Well, and so the point is that there were always these plans, and a lot of people in the government knew it. Now, there was an independent commission came out, and they're really mad at Netanyahu and they're mad at the IDF. And people missed it. They thought they could manage the problem. They didn't manage the problem. And what happened was, so between 2005, when they evacuated all the Jews out of Gaza, or drug them out of Gaza, and I had friends who were in that evacuation, Hamas built hundreds of miles of tunnels in 16 years. Well, in Lebanon, Hezbollah's been building tunnels for 40 years. I heard an interview with Eric Mandel, probably a guy we should all follow. And he said, listen, I was up in Lebanon a couple of years ago, and they took me to a Hezbollah tunnel from that Radwan brigade that they took out all the leadership of. It was 200 feet underground. It had dormitories. It was big enough to drive trucks through. It was 200 feet down. The bunker busters don't even reach that.
And that's all in bedrock too, up in there.
And so if the goal was to make, and so a few years ago, Pam and I were there, and we drove along the Lebanon border all the way from Majel Shams to Kiryat Shimona, Metula, all the way over to Nahariya and Rosh Hanikra, or however you say it. And I mean, we were like, here's the fence, and there's Lebanon, and there's Hezbollah. And I'm thinking, like, there were all these plans for them to come across. And so when are they going to do that? And so it's a little bit disconcerting. And so now Israel has done phenomenal in Lebanon. They have. I mean, they've taken out a lot of the missile firing capability. That's pretty much, they had a couple now since the ceasefire, but they took out a lot of that. And the concern was they're going to fire thousands of rockets a day. That didn't happen. Israel stopped that. That was great. They've only lost about 80 soldiers. They've killed thousands of Hezbollah soldiers in this period of time. They did 700 cross-border raids into Lebanon to take out facilities after October 7th, before they started the invasion the end of September, the land invasion. They had 700 operations. Nobody knew about it. So they took out all the Hezbollah leadership. Now Hezbollah is really weakened. I don't think there's any question that they're weakened. And I think this is a reason for the rebels being activated in Syria, because they know that Iran is weak. Iran can be taken in. But so I think there's a direct connection. And you mentioned the drones these guys were using. They're doing turbo rocket powered drones they're using. These are these guys, they drive around in pickup trucks. You know what I mean? And they're using these drones. And I was just reading an article this morning from someone he wrote a book back in 2015. Can't remember his name. He's got a big article at Forbes magazine today about how drones were going to completely change the face of warfare. That was in 2015. That was 9 years ago. Now we see it happening. So they took the opportunity that they had. Assad was up in Moscow last week. Maybe they did it because Assad's in Moscow, Russia's down here. We're going to make a big statement by what we do. And so they've taken over Aleppo and some areas. There's, a lot of question about whether the Assad regime is going to survive. I kind of think it will, but it's going to be a smaller enclave that it controls along the coast.
So, okay, I can ask you this. So we have the rebel forces going against the Assad regime. You have Russia's involved. We have Iran involved. We have Iraq involved. So who's supporting who? Russia's there holding up Assad, or is Russia just trying to establish more of their own footprint in that area?
I think Russia views itself. Yeah, I think Russia views itself as being a bigger player maybe than they are. If you remember, there was a meeting where Putin came to Syria a number of years ago, and Assad was there. It was at an air base, and Putin started to approach the podium, and Assad, this is in Syria, Putin's approaching a podium to speak in Syria. Assad is behind him, and Assad starts to walk with Putin to the podium. And some Russian guys grab Assad, sort of with the message, no, you don't go up there with Putin because Putin's in charge. And I've got the video of it somewhere on my computer because it's a fascinating thing to watch. So look, Russia went down there for their own interests. They wanted warm water port. They're locked in the Black Sea. They can't get out through the Strait, the Bosporus, and then the Dardanelles out of the Black Sea. They're kind of jammed up there. And I don't know that Russia has great submarines and some surface ships, but their aircraft carrier is kind of a joke. It travels with its own tugboats because it breaks down all the time.
All right. So Russia, though, you have Russia's in Ukraine. We have that.
Right.
And we can, I mean, what I'm watching in Syria, it's like, hey, they've got these two massive battlefronts, or the one in Syria is just, I mean, you look, you go, okay, it's not quite what Ukraine is, but it's building. What's Iran doing? You have Iran and Iraqi troops coming in.
By the way, I mentioned Ukraine. Ukraine has sent special forces into Syria. Do you know that? To take out, because they have the Wagner guys there, but they're also, the Russians are getting mercenaries from Syria to go to Ukraine. So Ukraine's sort of like, well, why don't we just cut the head of the snake off at the head of the snake? Rather than having to kill these guys here, we'll just go down to Syria and take them out before they even get up here. So that's how, and you don't even hear about this stuff. So Iran is there. Iran still wants, this is very important to Iran. Iran has a lot of, Shia militias there, particularly in the Golan Heights and areas along the Israel border, that type of thing. But the leadership has been decimated. Iran is back on its heels. And in a lot of the Middle East now, they're making fun of Iran because Iran has proven itself so weak. They keep saying, oh, Israel attacked us. They took out all of our air missile defenses. They struck this big base where we manufacture missiles at Parchin. It's really a nuclear-related facility, but we can't call it that because, and Israel is very clever that, the Biden administration said, don't you dare attack nuclear facilities in Iran, Israel. So then they went and they attacked secret nuclear facilities, and they weren't allowed to, nobody could say anything because then it would undermine the Biden administration, saying, well, they're not really developing a nuclear weapon, so this thing's very, very complicated. So Iran still wants to maintain its influence in Syria, but now Turkey sees that it has an opening. In Turkey, this is Muslim Brotherhood, radical Muslim militias and everything that Turkey supports because they don't like the Kurds. A lot of persecution of Christians going on in Syria and in Turkey and in the Kurdish areas. And so, but what you have fighting in Syria right now is you got three main factions all kind of fighting, some aligning with others, and it's very complicated. Yeah. But they're all bad guys. That's the thing. They're all bad guys. A lot of radical Muslims, ISIS types, people that left ISIS and went into the Syrian militias. that oppose the Assad regime.
That's
and so
okay. Yeah, that's exactly how it appears to me.
Jonathan Spire quoted, he posted on his Facebook page the other day, I thought it was a great quote from Menachem Begin, when they were having Iran and Iraq were fighting each other.
Okay, I'm going to throw...
Menachem Begin says, may they all have great success. May they all be successful in fighting each other, because then we don't have to worry about them as much.
That is great. All right, I'm going to throw this out, just food for thought. Maybe we can pick up here next week or something, because by next week we'll have more things sorted out. Okay, and then I'm going to ask you about normalization agreement, because we got to get there, because you left us hanging last time. We got to have time on that. Okay, here's what I look at. In Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 7, we know that Gog, the leader of the Magog invasion, is a guard for all of the troops that come against Israel. So as we see Russia positioning itself in that area, we have all these other ISIS type of groups that are in there. Somehow, out of this, Russia will come out as this protector there that's going to convey a message to Israel in the future. I'm not saying tomorrow or anything like that, everybody, so don't misquote me. Somehow in the future, Russia's going to come out as, we are here, and we are here to protect Israel. Israel, we've done this. Now you don't have to worry about what's to the north. It's going to get there. I don't know when, but it's going to get there. And I don't know how.
Actually, Tom, that was one of the points I was going to make last week when we started talking about coming peace and people pushing for peace and security and that type of thing. And we know it's going to be fake. It's going to be a fake peace. But look, Putin has been threatening nuclear war against everybody. They launched that missile last week, which I'm not sure that missile was quite as impressive as a lot of other people thought. As I said, there's a good article at Forbes magazine about that missile right now. But I'm thinking about this, you've got this convergence of all these things where you've got Trump coming in, and there's all this talk about reviving the Abraham Accords. You got Putin threatening nuclear war. But what would make Putin go down in great legacy is he would walk in and say, hey, I don't want to do that. I'm going to help make peace all over this place. That's possible. Trump wants to make peace. Everybody wants to make peace in the midst of this. I don't know how else you would describe it, as complete chaos.
It just adds an element that everybody's going to be crying out for peace, as we continue to press forward. And we throw in the Trump factor. I think it's just everything is just so fascinating.
I need to make a video of my background with little nuclear explosions going off all over the place, and animate my background there.
Have missiles flying the whole time. No kidding.
Yeah, it's. I don't know, Tom. I'm just thinking. So let's talk about normalization, because I know we're sort of limited on time. And Trump's doing this stuff, like Trump just appointed a couple of advisors that will touch on the Middle East. One was Jared Kushner's father, Ivanka Trump's father-in-law, Charles Kushner, who was convicted of some tax issues and Trump pardoned at the end of his first administration in 2020. He's now been appointed as the ambassador to France. At least he's suggested that's who he's going to appoint as ambassador to France. Well, France is up to its eyeballs in Lebanon. France has an energy company called Total Energy, and through the negotiations of Amos Hochstein, the energy czar in the first two Obama administrations and now in the third one, he's negotiated this deal, gas deal. You've been up there, you saw the boys in the border. They gave a lot of the area to Lebanon because, Lebanon's going to drill where Israel's been getting all this gas to help, run its desalinization plants, its electricity, that type of thing. So Lebanon's going to take part in this, and Lebanon's going to be successful. So they gave the contract to Total Energy, a French company, and they've been there over the last year drilling in that area. And what have they found? Sand and water. Now, I personally think that's divine intervention, but now that's France, and France is one of the people who's going to help guarantee this supposed ceasefire, not a peace agreement, but ceasefire in Lebanon. And I don't know. And now Charles Kushner, the father-in-law of Trump's daughter, is appointed as ambassador to France. Trump also announced another guy to be his advisor on Middle East affairs. And he is the father-in-law of Tiffany Trump, Trump's daughter by Marla Maples. So I guess right now, the way to get into the Trump circle is to, have a daughter that marries, or a son that marries one of Trump's daughters. But I think he's out of daughters now. So, but now you got two father-in-laws appointed just in the last few days to major foreign policy things that touch on the Middle East, and the Trump administration, and Jared Kushner hanging around there as an informal advisor on the Middle East, who was one of the architects of the Abraham Accords and the Trump peace and security plan that he came out with, Vision for Peace, or whatever that thing was called, that came out in 2020. And then the Abraham Accords followed after that. And so now you have the question too is, what's this going to do for normalization? Mm-hmm. And the whale that everybody's trying to get in normalization is Saudi Arabia. So there's a very interesting article of Foreign Policy. I'll just give you the first three things is, what is Mohammed bin Salman doing? And the guy says there's three possibilities. One is he's making nice with Iran because that's his way of negotiating something better with Trump. Another one is that's one possibility. Another possibility, and by the way, I haven't reached a conclusion on any one of these. Another possibility is that by looking like he's running to Iran, he's running away from Israel and any possibility of normalization, which I don't think is going to happen. But, he made these very, very strong statements. At least they appear to us to be very strong statements against Israel, genocide, shameful, all these things. And now they've got this 90-nation thing. It's called the Global Alliance for the Establishment of a Two-State Solution in Palestine. 90 countries. And they're having meetings all over the place. They had a meeting in Europe. They had one in the Middle East. They had one in Riyadh. They're having like weekly meetings on this, Tom. And then the third one is Mohammed bin Salman is just going to say, I don't want anything to do with any of you guys. I'm just going to go build my big cities and, these largest buildings on the planet. Saudi Arabia is now currently getting, I believe it's 25% of all steel produced in the world is going to Saudi Arabia.
25%?
Yes.
Wow.
And in the global supply chain, somewhere between 5 and 10% of all global logistics and supply chains are tied to Saudi Arabia.
Okay. Oh my gosh. All right.
By the way, did you have any of this on your end times bingo card?
No, I didn't have that. I didn't have any of the things that happened in the last 72 hours on that. All right. So with this, on the normalization agreements, you factor in Trump. He assigned Jared Kushner his first time around, hey, go ahead and do this. It's almost like we are picking up where we left off. I look at it's quite possible, like you said, this is Obama's parting gift, what's going on up in Syria too, is how I think you said that earlier. Okay, you look at that. We know the CIA has been heavily involved in starting things like this in various areas, including Afghanistan and other areas. So you really do wonder about that. Okay, Trump comes in. Normalization agreement is still on the table. What MBS does, we're going to find out. But if you look at, it was also Yemen who launched missiles at Israel over the last couple of days too, last 48 hours. So they do that. In the past, Israel has retaliated and just decimated certain things with the Yemenites. You bring in Trump, we have the issue of the Red Sea, the Suez Canal shipping. I'm thinking that that is something that Trump will want to deal with rather quickly, the problems with the Red Sea, because he doesn't want a bunch of terrorists controlling the shipping ports. And you throw in that normalization agreements. It's going to be interesting to see, I'll tell you that much, because my bingo card's all messed up right now.
Yeah, I know. Mine's confetti because it's just not worth even following anymore. It's funny. I did that thing when I spoke at the conference out there in California. My wheel of prophecy, like a wheel of fortune with all the different end times players. By the way, I talked about this yesterday. I think we can just go to a conference now and spin the wheel and start talking about that. I'm reading Daniel 7. I'm reading Daniel 8. And, Daniel, is it 7 Daniel 8 is the goat, right? The goat and ram. The ram and two-horn goat.
Yes, 7 is the fourth empire rises up.
Four empires, right. And by the way, the empire characteristic of that little horn is a little horn with a big mouth speaking pompous words. Yes. Like nobody could imagine anything like that happening in the world today. He said sarcastically, but then you look at the ram and the goat in Daniel 8, which I think is a prophecy for the time of the end. And I'm not so sure we're not on the verge of seeing that also come into play with the ram. It says Grisha, but I think it's Jovan is the name. And I think it's probably Turkey against Iran. And that's something that could happen.
So you look at chapter 8, that part not as being in past with Medo-Persian Empire, the Greek Empire, and so forth. You look at it as still coming.
I think it could be. And doesn't it say there that it says it's going to happen at the time of the end?
When you get to chapter 8, where you have this. By prosperity, he will.
It's in verse 8:17. Gabriel interprets the vision, chapter 8, verse 17. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell on my face. But he said to me, "Understand, son of man, that the vision refers to the time of the end."
Yeah, and then you continue reading, and then it comes to, So, okay, Now we got a whole Bible study. Now you've opened up another can of worms. I have a friend I'm going to have on here, a colleague, who believes that America is the little horn, and I know that's gonna mess some people up, but it's interesting thought,
Sure. I can't exclude any of those possibilities right now. As I said, a lot of my things, I sort of have a basket. So I have America, I've got the Mystery Babylon, and I might have different parts of the bed. It's like one of those recycled containers. I put this part here and this part here and this, and I see which one fills up because I think it's not entirely clear exactly how this is going to be.
So just for the record, when I look at this part of chapter 8, the vision refers to time then. It takes you through, I believe it takes you through world history right up to the time of the end is what it is. That's how I look at chapter 8, because then it continues, clearly it's talking about Antichrist when it says he understands sinister schemes. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He shall destroy fearfully and shall prosper and thrive. He shall destroy the mighty and also the holy people, speaking of Israel. Through his cunning he shall cause deceit to prosper under his rule. He exalt himself in his heart. He shall destroy many in their prosperity. He shall even rise against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without human means. So I think it's world history, and it takes you right up to the final coming kingdom with Antichrist, and that's what I think. But you think it all is future. Okay.
Well, no, I think we need to do a roundtable and talk about how is prophecy fulfilled, because we have a tendency, Joel Richardson's doing a series on this right now, and I think it's pretty good, because we have this tendency in the West, our mind says, okay, here's a prophecy and it's fulfilled, and I can put that away. I don't have to worry about it anymore. But I don't think that's how the Eastern mindset looks at prophecy. It's sort of cyclical. It repeats itself. There's a partial fulfillment, then there's a final fulfillment.
Or as you say,
it's a little bit trickier.
Prophecy is pattern, as you have said so many times.
Prophecy is pattern, and listen, we ought to do a roundtable and talk about that for a couple hours because it's a very fascinating study.
I have an idea. How about I get on this gentleman? He was an instructor at a Bible college. One of his subjects he taught was eschatology. I should get you and he on to talk about these things because his viewpoint is also different and it's challenging. And look, we aren't saved by our understanding of how these things work out. We're saved by our faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. I think it's interesting to work through this, and I would love to do that. Let's do a roundtable if you're okay.
Right.
We'll start working on the players.
You know what we need to do one of these prophecy conferences now is we just need to sort of let everybody do their talk. And then about 7 o'clock after everybody's done is we need to just put a couple mics in the green room and broadcast that out for everybody here because those are very fascinating conversations.
Yeah, I tell you, we'll bring Joe Richardson and Bill Salas and Lee Brainerd into the mix. That'd make a real interesting conversation.
Yeah, I mean it really would because Lee's got some different ideas, and then he's at odds with other people, and so it's interesting. But he's a nice guy. I mean, I've met him and done at least one conference with him, so. I think we're at this time, Tom, where we need to be a little bit humble about our conclusions and see how it plays out because there's nothing in the scripture that says, okay, this prophecy will be fulfilled.
I'm going to, this is my thinking on it. We know we know what the end is. We know what the end's going to look like. We know there's going to be this Ezekiel 38 battle. We know Israel has to come to a place of some type of fake peace. We know Israel's going to be surprised when the battle takes place. Right now, they're on guard. We understand that. The normalization agreements make sense to fit that bill. When you look at these things, and there's so many other, in chapter 8, we know ultimately, it does say this is the time of the end. So you could be absolutely right, John, and I'll give you that. I've taught Daniel many times. I'll give you that. It definitely concludes with Antichrist rising to power by prosperity, or I think it's King James says peace, he'll destroy many. So we get all that, it's going to end there. But I look at it like this. When Jesus came the first time, okay, the Messiah is going to be born in Bethlehem, Micah chapter 5, verse 2. He's going to be called out of Egypt. He's going to be from Galilee region. Well, wait a minute. How could that possibly be? On your bingo card, you would have had things all over. All of a sudden, Caesar Augustus says, hey, everybody's got to go be registered to their own city. Still, and then you go, oh, now my bingo card's all messed up. Everybody's got to move. How could the Messiah be born in Bethlehem now? Everything got messed up. All of a sudden, the Messiah is born in Bethlehem, and then Herod comes along 18 months later and says, I'm going to kill all the little boys that are 2 years old and younger in Bethlehem, so he got to flee to Egypt.
He was taking the prophecy seriously.
What?
He was taking the prophecy seriously.
Yes, but you look at it and you go, yes, he was, and so did the Magi from the east. So you look at it, but there's nobody who could have predicted this would have been a chain reaction. Started with Caesar Augustus to issue a decree for everybody to be registered, and the Messiah would be from Bethlehem, called out of Egypt and out of the Galilee region. You couldn't possibly say the news of the day would make your bingo card would have been all messed up. And I think that's, if we look at it that way, we know what the end's going to be. We know we got to get there. And, and we can see everything shaking up so fast.
One example, Matthew says, behold, this is that which was what the prophet said, behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son. Okay. And so I often think about that is that prophecy's around for a long time. And I don't think people took it seriously, because I think if people took it seriously, they would have been looking at, well, Daniel's prophecy of the 70 weeks, which, deals with part of Messiah's ministry and that type of thing. And so where they're like, okay, we're getting around that time. Hey, do you have any pregnant virgins in your village? They weren't doing that.
No way.
I don't think.
In fact, the Bible even tells us that until he was glorified, these things didn't even make any sense to the disciples themselves. So I'm watching a debate over the weekend. It was several years ago, but it was Dr. Michael Brown, you know, and Rabbi Shmuley Botak, I believe his name is. I've watched him many times. So, and he's an Orthodox Jew, and he goes, prove to me prove there's a virgin birth. He goes, and where do you see that in the scripture? When you take Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14, how would you know that's going to relate to this virgin birth of this girl in Bethlehem? You couldn't. And from an Orthodox perspective today, blindness of part has happened in Israel. They can't see it. And a lot of people throughout history, even the Jews, it would have been hard for them to see unless the Holy Spirit had ministered to them about these things.
Right. And sometimes we don't know. Somebody, I don't remember why they wrote to me, but I think they disagreed with me, which happens occasionally. But they wrote a very nice email to me, a message and everything. And the guy kind of said, I don't know who he was referring to. He had heard somebody say once that if you're out at night and you see a car coming at you with headlights on, you can describe, here comes a car with headlights on. But somebody who's standing further away says, oh, look, there's a car with taillights. You understand what I'm saying is you're looking at the same thing, but from different perspectives. Yeah. And then I thought, well, that just made prophecy a whole lot more complicated. Thanks for sharing that with me. But I think that's the way it is.
It is. Hey, listen, we're out of time.
Yep.
And so, John, you have closing words for everybody.
Boy, folks, now's a better time than ever to share the gospel with those around us. The world's in a big state of chaos. Listen, I know a lot of people were excited about the election of Trump and everything. We've talked about it, and there's a lot of disagreement over that. But the one thing I can say, I think without reservation, I think everybody would agree with, things in terms of Bible prophecy have not slowed down. I think they've accelerated since the election of Trump. So that's kind of interesting.
I do too. They have definitely not slowed down. Not everything else going to hold. It's accelerated. John, thank you for joining me today. So I'm going to assume we're going to get together in the next week or so, and we'll have maybe a little bit more clarity, or who knows? It could get even, our bingo cards could even get more messed up. But thanks, John. Stay warm, because I know it's cold where you are.
It is. God bless. Thanks, Tom.
God bless you. See you.